Hello everyone, and thanks very much for all your support with my YouTube channel and everybody who has subscribed. I'm very grateful. Today I'd like to speak about geopolitical news and the impacts it has here on us domestically in Ireland. Now, over the last number of weeks we've seen a big escalation in the conflict in Ukraine by the decision by Biden's regime in the US and the deep state to allow Ukraine to use long-range missiles into Russian territory, the Atacama missiles that they've been much vaunted about, trying to look for a wider escalation in this conflict. Now, there's only 30 plus days left in the Biden regime, and a lot of chaos has been created in their last number of days by the deep state, by people like Blinken, and obviously people like Jake Sullivan as well, who are heavily involved in this escalation of the conflict in Ukraine and the decision-making process. And of course, any negotiations for peace must be conditional on the response of the US regime, according to Zelensky. But of course, the other side of it, we've seen the escalation in the Middle East in terms of what's happened in Syria with the regime change, where now we have an ex-Al-Qaeda, ISIS leader, al-Jawani, taking control of Syria and ousting the regime of al-Assad at the behest of many proxies. And I'm certain this is similar to what's happened many times before by many NATO interventions we've seen, and illegal wars in many countries. We've seen it happen time and time again, such as areas as Iraq, Libya, and we've seen absolute catastrophes being created because of those wars that have been sought upon the people of those regions who've suffered again. And it's always ordinary people that suffer in all wars. Ordinary working class people are the ones who always pay their price. In Ukraine, nearly 2 million have been killed on both sides. And we all know those leaders only protect their own oligarchs. But what is important as well to note is the narrative change from the media. When they speak about what's happening in Ukraine, they say it's an illegal invasion. They never talk about what's happened in Donbass from 2014, where 14,000 ethnic Russians were killed. Of course, this isn't part of the discussion. And on the other side, when it's Israel incursions into Syria, they would say it's about creating a buffer zone rather than actually having a legal invasion of the sovereignty of Syria. But of course, sovereignty is a backward-looking idea, according to Micheál Martin. And according to Micheál Martin and Simon Harris, they're waxing lyrical about the regime change in Syria, not realising the chaos that this is going to create moving forward as well. The people who have suffered for years and years will continue to suffer under this new regime and the huge faction fighting that's going to take place because of these interventions, all at the lust of these warmongers at the top of society. But it's also very important to note what's happening in Europe, because yesterday Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, said that Europe should get ready to be in a wartime economy and on a wartime footing. Now, what does this mean? This means we have to make changes in people's lives to, according to Rutte, the ex-Netherlands Prime Minister, preserve our way of life and to make decisions about whether we use the money to build up the military-industrial complex and create more wars and create more brutality and horrors of wars and kill more people, or pay that money on basic services we need, basic social services, and make the sacrifice. Don't pay for pensions, don't pay for health services, don't pay for housing. Pay for more money to be transferred upwards from the public purse into the military-industrial complex. And not to mention the bloodlust and the loss of life that will occur with any escalation in these wars as it comes to the continent of Europe. But domestically here in Ireland, it's important because we've seen the Irish political leaders time and time again destroy Irish neutrality. They've signed up to NATO Partnership for Peace, which is absolutely just ludicrous. Partnership for Peace, a warmongering machine that has been involved in many interventions around the world and illegal invasions. We've seen that happen in many countries: Yugoslavia, Libya, Yemen, Iraq, Somalia, and many more countries. But of course, this isn't the narrative that the media want to portray or the Irish political establishment want to portray. They want to say it's about preserving our way of life. Does things really change in Irish society? Well over 100 years ago, John Redmond made a speech at Woodenbridge in County Wicklow, which split the Irish Volunteers, and a lot of Irish men went off to die on the battlefields of Somme, used as cannon fodder, and many more parts of bloody fields of Europe to die for democracy. Die for an imperial power. We should have no hand, act or part with any imperial power, whether that's a drive towards the European army, drive towards NATO, or any form of militarism. We should be standing up for Irish neutrality, where we stand up for Pacific settlements, international disputes, and use our voice for diplomacy. But of course, this is an antithesis to these political leaders in Ireland, who are more interested in selling out our sovereignty, selling out our independence, selling out any semblance of democracy, and moving towards more war, and dragging young Irish men and women in to die on these wars that serve the interests of the vulture capitalists, big equity companies, BlackRocks, the Vanguards, the State Streets, and the big corporations, and the military-industrial complex at the expense of ordinary people. But of course, we've seen the fallout of these policies in terms of what's happened in Ukraine with the immigration chaos. But of course, they will never speak openly and honestly about what these wars are all about. It's all about their own agenda, their own neoliberal, warmongering, imperial agenda to dominate, to control, to serve the interests of the super rich and wealthy, and to keep ordinary people down. So that's why it's important now to speak out about what's going on. Use your voice as well to speak out what's going on. We should be standing up for Irish neutrality. We should have no hand, act or part in any war. And what's happening now is a drive towards wider escalation of this conflict because of these absolute psychopaths at the top of society who are more interested in their power, control, greed and dominance rather than any interest in ordinary people. So thanks a lot for the support of my videos, really appreciate them, and please press subscribe to my YouTube channel. Take care, Slán.